Hello lovely people, it's Nicole, and today I want to talk about Twilight. So I used to mention Twilight fairly frequently on my channel, kind of just in passing, a lot of times in tags in the context of questions that were like, name your least favorite book, blah blah blah. And I haven't even mentioned it in passing for like at least a year. And I just find it interesting because it's something that at one point was like the biggest discussion in YA. The discussion's definitely died down a bit, but I mean, if you look at the major YA trends throughout, the past 15-20 years, Twilight is the cause of one of the biggest ones, and that's the big paranormal romance boom. Sorry, I just realized my light wasn't on. I just find the whole discussion around Twilight really interesting, and I think that it's a discussion worth having. And now that I feel like at least I've gotten some distance from these sort of very heated emotions that were going on in the height of its popularity, and I've grown and matured a lot since I was, 13, 14, I think that I am now better prepared to have a more nuanced discussion about this. I will say that I have been on both sides of the debate at different times in my life. When the books were first coming out, I read the books. I loved them. I was so excited for the movies. I watched the first movie, wasn't really a huge fan of it, and then after that kind of fell in with the very aggressively anti-Twilight side. And since then, I've kind of come sort of back to the middle. Hearing my fellow booktubers and book community people talk about it has been one of the most influential things on my opinions on Twilight. Seeing the impact it's had on other people, I think, is a really important sort of factor in talking about books, because like obviously the books we read have impacts on us, and I am a firm believer in the fact that the stories you learn and read as a kid have a massive impact on who we are as adults. I know at least that was the case for me with like Harry Potter. And so I think that rejecting Twilight entirely isn't quite fair to it, because I do think that there are a number of things about it that are important to talk about, that are good things that it has done. So I want to talk about some of those good aspects of it. I also want to talk about the other side of the debate, some of the issues that I have with Twilight, and then I'll sort of bring everything back together in the end. But first of all, talking about the sort of pros side, I think that, like I said, a lot of people in this community have talked about how Twilight is the thing that brought them into reading or brought them back to reading. I think it's really easy when you're in, late elementary school, junior high, high school, to fall away from reading. You're busy with schoolwork. It's not exactly a social activity. You just want to hang out with your friends. There's also a little bit of an element that like it's not like the cool thing. And obviously I'm not saying that reading can't be cool, or that it shouldn't be cool, or that it's not cool anywhere, but overarching trends. But you have so many people who talk about how book series like Harry Potter, like The Hunger Games, like Divergent, like Twilight, these really big phenomenons that reminded them how much they love reading as a kid, or even if they were never readers as kids, showed them that reading can be an incredible, like, transcendental experience. And that's sort of the first thing that snapped me out of my, like, Twilight is 100% evil kind of mindset. The fact that it's done so much good for this community in some ways. It's brought so many people into this community who wouldn't have been here otherwise. I also think that there's something to be said about the fact that it has had a definite impact on the genre. It's definitely helped push YA from just a tiny little side section of the bookstore to one of the most popular genres out there. And again, I'm not saying that's entirely due to Twilight, but I'm not sure that like Hunger Games or Divergent would have been as big as they were if it weren't for Twilight. And of course, Twilight was also playing off of Harry Potter's fame at the time. All these different things are building on each other, but Twilight is, you cannot deny that it was a crucial building block in making YA the genre it is today. I also think there's something to be said about Stephenie Meyer's writing. Now, I'm not going to claim that she is an incredible writer. I'm not personally a big fan of her writing style. I don't think it's particularly elegant or nuanced or interesting. But that being said, it is extraordinarily addictive. I don't know if that was a conscious writing decision on Stephenie Meyer's part. How can I write this to keep people reading? But I do know that the most common thing you hear about people reading Twilight is, I could not put it down. These are not short books, and yet people fly through them. And that's because something about the way Stephenie Meyer writes, you just cannot take your eyes away from it, whether you love it or hate it. You can't stop reading. As much as I'm not a fan of most of her style of writing, I do have a great respect for that. Keeping readers on their toes, on the edge of their seat, is an important skill. I also think that there is something to be said about the usage of the sort of Mary Sue main character. Now, this is something that I used as sort of ammo for reasons to hate Twilight when I was younger, but I've sort of learned more and grown more and realized that the usage of quote-unquote Mary Sue characters can be really important. There are a couple different articles I've read about it. I'll see what of them I can find and link them in the doobly-doo, because it's a really interesting discussion about how women, especially young women, use these characters that are not the most unique or maybe a little bit self-insert in order to explore this kind of fantasy fulfillment that women in society are not often allowed to explore. It's the kind of like romance novel effect where it's a way of exploring your sexuality, your desires, your fantasies, and writing your own story in a business that until recently has been very heavily dominated by, straight, wealthy white men. So again, like, do I think Bella is a particularly interesting character? No, but the fact that she's not interesting serves a purpose, and her blandness allows young girls to put themselves in her shoes very easily and to use Twilight as their own sort of fantasy fulfillment. Now, sort of shift into problematizing, into discussing why some of that might be a bit problematic. Do I think Twilight should be what is used for this fantasy fulfillment? No. It also led to 50 Shades of Grey, which is, I would argue, an even worse source of fantasy fulfillment. Yes, it brought conversations of BDSM, at least helped to sort of alleviate potential shame that came with reading erotica, but it is an incredibly toxic and bad depiction of the BDSM community with horrifically unsafe practices and little to no consent. There are definitely other books that I think would have been better to sort of fill Twilight's slot in the world of YA. It would have been nice if the book that had served the purpose of Twilight didn't romanticize abusive relationships like Twilight does, because Twilight's relationships are genuinely troubling, and the fact that they're viewed as this epic love story by so many young girls is really troubling. And the fact that it's portrayed like that in the media, not only Bella and Edward's story, but also Bella and Jacob, there's this huge competition of who loves her more, who's better for her, when both of them are super shitty to her. You have Edward leaving her sobbing in the woods for several months. She's thrown into this massive depressive episode because her boyfriend leaves her, and this is viewed as it's just because she loves him so much. It's romantic, and as soon as he's back, everything's hunky-dory. Obviously, like, I'm not here to shame anyone whose mental health issues spike when they are experiencing a breakup. Like, that happens. But the romanticization of it is the thing that I have an issue with. The fact that it's never really addressed after he comes back. The fact that for months she pushed her friends and family and everyone away. And when Jacob was finally able to sort of pull her out of her funk a little bit, he sexually assaulted her. There's a scene in which he kisses her without her consent when she pushes him away, and as a reaction to, being assaulted, punches him in the face and then proceeds to break her hand because werewolf face bones, whatever. He laughs at her. She's defending herself from his assault and he laughs at her. And then later I think it's in Eclipse, she's like freezing and he's threatening to leave. He's basically like holding the possibility of saving her life hostage, and the only way that she can convince him to stay and potentially save her life is to kiss him. Which, again, like, that's coercion. That's not consent. Like, he's fully aware of the fact that she is in a committed monogamous relationship, and not only is he aware of that fact, her boyfriend is there. And yet he's still throwing a tantrum until he gets her to to kiss him. And then her relationship with Edward, apart from just completely leaving without any sort of explanation for months, without any regard for her mental or physical health, he also is constantly reminding her that not only does he have the ability to hurt and kill her, but he has the desire to. It's something that he would enjoy. You know, he tells her he's dangerous and she shouldn't be with him because it's a risk to her health. Yet he still dates her, which leads to her getting hurt so many times. There is an instance in Breaking Dawn when, before they get married, which I'm not gonna go into the whole marriage immediately after high school thing, that's a personal choice, showing it as this, they love each other so much and, you know, that's what you do when you love someone is you immediately get married is kind of problematic, but like, you do you. There are some people who got married very young who are very happy together, and I'm very happy for them. So not really gonna get into that too much, but the fact that before they get married, without her knowledge, he sells her truck that she loves so dearly for the entire series and buys her this like massive armored car. It's controlling and it's making major life choices for your partner without their knowledge or consent, which is hugely problematic. There's this massive power dynamic between them the whole time where he's constantly talking about how she can't protect herself and how he's the only one who can protect her, and she just goes along with it. There's also an element of this isn't Bella exploring her sexuality. Whenever she talks about something that she wants to explore with him in a sort of sexual context, he just kind of shuts it down and says like, no, you don't know what you want, you don't know what you need, like, I'll hurt you. And that is happening throughout, I think, most of Eclipse and the first part of Breaking Dawn. So this book isn't even allowing for that exploration of sexual fantasy because Edward doesn't allow Bella to explore her sexual fantasies unless they are within the very strict parameters that he sets. Even once they do get to go have wild, fun sex, it's not so fun because he physically hurts her during sex. They don't have a conversation beforehand about, are you okay with me leaving bruises? Are you okay with things getting a little rough? They just kind of fall into bed together and she wakes up the next day with bruises all over her body to the point where she can barely go out into town on their honeymoon without people being majorly worried about her. After they get married, she completely shuts herself off from friends and family. Yes, to a certain extent that's because she, eventually gets turned into a vampire, but also once she and Edward get together throughout the entire books, she majorly withdraws from her friends, and that is such a huge red flag. Sort of flipping back to Jacob for a second, there's also the element of imprinting that's in the books, which is genuinely kind of terrifying. I think that's one of the most ominous paranormal elements of the book. The fact that there's a werewolf character who has this girl that he kind of likes at his school who's not at all interested in him. He magically imprints on her, and all of a sudden she's obsessed with him. That is so disturbing. Another werewolf who imprints on a toddler, watches her grow up, just waiting till she's old enough for him to date, which is super fucking creepy. And I'll get into that a little bit more, talking about Jacob specifically. Then there's the leader of the pack who has this girl that he's imprinted on who is scarred because he's physically hurt her and she doesn't really have the option or the agency to leave because of this magical bond that they have. And you can debate the sort of psychology behind imprinting forever, but the fact of the matter is they want to be with them because of this magical bond, and they didn't choose this magical bond. They didn't choose for their partner to be a werewolf. You get to Jacob and Renesmee, where, first of all, you find out that the only reason Jacob was ever interested in Bella is because he wanted to get with her unborn child, which is yikes. Then there's the fact that he sees this baby and he's like, yes, this is my soulmate, which means that this baby never has the option for anything else. She never gets to choose what she wants out of a romantic partner. She's just kind of stuck with him, and she's been told that literally since the day she was born. This is who you're gonna be with for the rest of your life, which, because you guys are both immortal supernatural creatures, is gonna be forever. You don't get a choice in that. And you never have, and you never will. There was never a single day in your life where this was not decided for you. And that is terrifying. The fact that, you know, he is grooming this child to be with him, and the fact that, like, he's watching this baby grow up, being like, oh, give me, for I guess Renesmee it's only like a few weeks or whatever, give it some time and you'll be super sexy. Like, that's so fucked up. That is so fucked up. And also there's the issue of like emotional maturity, and like, yes, she physically grows really fast, but like, can you really gain the emotional maturity you need to have an adult relationship in that short of time? I don't think so. But going more into Jacob, you also have the issue of the Native American representation, and I do think it's worth appreciating that the Twilight movies are one of the only movie franchises I've ever seen that have such a significant part of the cast be Native American, actually played by Native American actors, and I do appreciate that they didn't hella whitewash the Native American characters. But I've heard a lot of discussion from Native American people that the way that they're written in the books is kind of yikes and pretty appropriative. Again, I'm not Native American, so I can't go into that too in depth just because I don't know, but I do think it's an issue worth talking about. There's a lot of issues that I'm raising here. I don't entirely hate Twilight. I used to. I don't anymore. I think that something that was raised to my attention the other night while I was scrolling through Tumblr is the fact that there are a lot of really, really interesting side characters who are super badass. I mean, you have Rosalie, who was brutally assaulted, and then as soon as she turns into a vampire, murders the entire gang of rapists. You have Alice, who was a psychic in a mental institution in the 20s. Jasper, who fought in this amazing vampire war. Carlisle, who's a doctor who's trying to atone for all the killings he did. Leah, who's the only biologically female werewolf ever. Like, there are all these really interesting side characters who are really cool. They're just all overshadowed by the aggressive toxicity of so much of the relationship, of so many of the relationships. I love the found family aspect of the Cullens and the relationship that Jacob's dad, uncle, I don't remember what the relationship is, and Bella's dad have. That's like such a great friendship. Like I said, there are definitely things that I like and appreciate about Twilight. I just don't think that it's worth overlooking all the toxicity that it portrays, and not only portrays but romanticizes, for fun writing and a couple cool side characters. So I guess my sort of conclusion is I appreciate the things that Twilight's done for the community. I really do. I just wish that it had been done by a better book series. That being said, I know that this is a widely debated topic, and I would honestly love to hear other people's thoughts on this. So please, 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 let's talk about it in the comments. Let me know if there's anything that I said that you don't agree with, if there's any like factual stuff I said that I got wrong. Like I said, I have read the Twilight books, but it has been a sec and I don't have copies to reference, so I am operating a lot off of memory and citations I can find online. So if I got a couple facts wrong, please let me know, and I'd love to talk to you about them in the comments. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I love you, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!